So, Dr. Santos, let's pretend that I'm a youth worker and I'm trying to model happiness for my youth. How would I even start to do something like this? What would I focus on both for myself and as I'm doing programming or things like that for the youth?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked this question because I think people, especially people who work with youth and people who care about others, right? We're often focused on how can I make other people happy? But I think it's worth recognizing that one way you can make other people happy is to focus on your own happiness, is to kind of put the oxygen mask on first before you try to help other people, right? The data really suggests that this is powerful, right? Like it allows us not to burn out and keep doing the hard, often hard work that many of us do, right? But it's also the science also shows that another way that you can focus on making others happy is literally by being happy yourself, right? The research shows that there is emotional contagion in our species. In other words, if you're around people who are feeling optimistic and joyous and laughing, it's hard to be around those people and not catch a little bit of that yourself. By the same token, if you're around people who are just negative and looking at the downside of things and constantly angry, it's hard not to suck up those emotions too, right? This is why one of the reasons we and the people and the youth we work with are so affected by social media, right? There's evidence that emotional contagion doesn't just happen one-on-one live. It also happens in the context of what we read in our feeds, right? If we're seeing more negative things, I think we get more negative ourselves, right? And that means it kind of is bad that we're affected so much by the people around us, and by our feeds and the stuff that we read. But it also means that we can be a force for good, right? We can be the positivity that we want to see out there in the world. We can be the positivity that we want to see in our feeds, right? Because we concede the good emotions, we concede the positivity and the optimism, right? And I think that that becomes really important, like when you're working with youth, right? Sometimes the best way you can intervene is just to be that positive presence yourself. And that can lead to what researchers call an affective spiral, right? And you kind of know this, imagine you walk into work and then there's like the negative Nelly and you're like, oh, and you soak up the negativity. Then you go home and then you're negative to your spouse or your kids and then they're more negative. Like you're kind of creating this spiral that's going downward. You can be the seed that makes the spiral that goes upward, right? So you're talking to one of the students on your team and then you're positive. They then take that to their families reflect that back on them. They come back, the next time you work with them and they're brighter, right? You can create a positive affective spiral. And I think you can do it by a lot of the tips that we've talked about. You need to worry about your healthy habits. You need to focus on your gratitude, your social connection, right? All the things that build you up and feel nutritious for you. You need to make room for those because doing so is basically making room for happiness in the people you work with too.
That's really helpful. And it's helpful because some of this can feel very ethereal and difficult to sort of pin down. And you do a great job of pinning it down. I don't mean that as a critique, but there's a sense of goodness, how do I actually influence a system in this way? And it sounds like the research is showing that that's actually possible, which is encouraging.
Yeah, possible and, I want to say easy, right? Like all good things
Yeah.
take some work and effort, but if you do the right kinds of things, if you follow these evidence-based practices, it's really achievable.
Mm, yeah. Thanks.